Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Mayhem and Circulation by Leah Dobrinska, narrated by Eliza Summers. Chapter 1. What do you think? Is he dead or just stunned? As the town of Larkspur's library director, Greta Plank got her fair share of unique inquiries, but this wasn't the type of question she was used to fielding. Greta glanced up into Dolores Jenkins' pensive face and opened her mouth to respond, but Dolores's best friend, Celeste, beat her to the punch. How are you so sure he's a he? Could very well be a lady for all you know. Oh, hush, Celeste. Dolores waved her off. Does it matter at this point? I can't imagine the poor thing would appreciate us getting something so wrong, Celeste huffed. Greta sat back on her heels. She'd usually laugh at the familiar, good-natured squabbling of two of her favorite Larkspur residents. But given the present circumstances, she kept her expression neutral, because what she was staring at wasn't funny. Matters of life or death never were. To be fair, in this case, the life in question was that of a crow, an extremely common and, to many, an extremely annoying bird, but still. It was early on a Thursday morning in mid-October. She was kneeling in the middle of a group of her neighbors in the median of Larkspur Lane. They had all congregated to assess the situation. What's the verdict, Greta? Dolores, clad in a snug-fitting bathrobe with hair still tucked into her bonnet, crouched next to Greta, as well as she was able, given her recently broken leg. Dolores had gotten quite adept at navigating life on crutches. I wouldn't consider myself an expert on birds, but I think this one's a goner. Greta dropped the stick she had used to prod at the lifeless aviary and stood to her full 5 2" height. She wiped her hands on her pale green dress, tucked her curly, strawberry golden hair behind her ears, and stuffed her hands into the pockets of her camel-colored Sherpa jacket. At just shy of 30 years old, and still relatively new to the town of Larkspur, she guessed she should be grateful people took her seriously. At least seriously enough to ask her input on matters of bird deaths. Poor little Tweety, Celeste clicked her tongue. She was tall and lanky, with blonde hair that had turned white with age. Greta had never seen her without a full face of makeup and a wrist full of bangles. This morning was no different. Natural causes or foul play? What do you suppose? A bark of laughter echoed from the back of the circle of neighbors. Greta isolated a teenager as the source of the guffaw. Landon Diddle, if she wasn't mistaken. She recognized him from his participation in the summer reading program at the library. His mom, Cassie, was shooting daggers at him. Landon, show some respect for the dead. What? Landon held up his hands, a grin curling at his lips. She said foul play. Get it? Foul? Foul? Not funny, Cassie bit out. Come on. It's punny, Landon whined. Cassie shooed him toward their house, lecturing him about manners and the fine art of reading the room on the way. Greta had half a thought to call Landon back and tell him she agreed with him, but Dolores grabbed her attention. Do you suppose the bird's death had anything to do with the rest of this destruction? Dolores looked down the street, and the circle turned to assess the damage. The usually picturesque boulevard that cut through the small town of Larkspur was a mess. Dirt, egg yolk, and the dead bird were flung across the road like bloodshed. The mums that had just yesterday filled the planters in the median with deep, jewel-toned blooms and made the spine of their quaint small town seem almost regal were ravaged as if someone had taken a machete to them. The heads of the autumnal flowers were strewn about the roadway, some crushed by traffic, some wilting from the early morning sun. Eggs were smashed against the trunks of the trees, which, given the price of a dozen these days, seemed a particular crime. All in all, Larkspur Lane looked like a completely defeated garden war zone. I don't know. Did any of you hear anything last night? Not a peep, Celeste spoke for the crowd. Among them was Stuart Diddle, Landon's father, as well as several other neighbors from down the block. Greta didn't recognize one gentleman who had circled up with them. Perhaps he was a visitor to Larkspur, in town for the upcoming fall festival. His expression was blank, and he didn't speak. Greta grimaced, hating the impression this view of town would leave. Dolores frowned. Whoever is responsible for this atrocity was as quiet as a mouse. One of the women stuck her nose in the air and shot a glance in the direction of where Cassie had ushered Landon inside. My money's on some high schoolers with too much time on their hands. Another woman nodded. Kids these days don't understand the value of property. You may be right. Celeste crossed her arms, bracelets jangling. This seems like a stupid, childish prank. Who else would want to taint the look of the town, especially with our big showcase coming up? Who indeed? In conjunction with the fall festival, Mayor Sandra Collins had landed a spotlight feature in a regional tourism publication, Midwest Now. The magazine and online platform was known for its honesty and lack of bias. Tourism pieces showcased the good, the bad, and the ugly about the featured destinations. This certainly doesn't seem to be the way to put our best foot forward, does it? Greta turned to catch Stuart rolling his eyes. At her arched brows, Stuart shrugged. Maybe that's a good thing. The mayor has gone too far with this showcase, if you ask me. Greta opened her mouth, but Dolores cut in. Oh, pish-posh, Stu. Don't be such a fuddy-duddy. Everyone knows a spotlight on Larkspur is a good thing. Stuart's eyes flashed. The mayor doesn't know what's best for this town. If she did, she'd be handling things much differently. I'm afraid she won't see the light until it's too late, and she'll let Larkspur be inundated with all sorts of riffraff. With that, he strode across the street, wrenched open his front door, and disappeared inside. What's gotten into Stuart? Greta asked, no one in particular. Bee in his bonnet, that's what. A look of disgust transformed Celeste's usually placid features. Stuart and his crew are of the school of thought that opening Larkspur to increased traffic by way of vacationers will ruin the town for us locals. He doesn't like the idea of the feature piece in Midwest Now on principle. Dolores scowled. Seems like he's forgotten that tourism is a boon to the local economy. Besides, Larkspur is meant to be shared. We've always been a welcoming community. Those gathered nodded in agreement. I wish there was something we could do about this. Celeste gestured to the roadway, her shoulders slumping. It's not like we can glue the flowers back together. Dolores patted her arm in solidarity. If the two thought there was any chance it would work, Dolores and Celeste would break out the hot glue guns and secure each mum's head, one by one, no matter how long it took. They both had green thumbs, and Greta was certain seeing the beautiful flowers destroyed was eating them up inside. That and the dead bird. She glanced down at the matted black feathers in a mobile crow. She had to suppress a shudder. She wasn't one to put stock in omens, and this was a crow, not a raven. But a large black bird was a large black bird. Any librarian or reader worth their salt would pick up on the undertones of a dead one in the middle of town. Just ask Edgar Allan Poe, or William Shakespeare. Greta had a bad feeling about this. Chapter 2. You know what? Greta shook off her morbid literary thoughts. It could be worse. Thankfully, whoever caused the damage left the large, quaking aspen trees, which stood at even intervals along the median, unharmed, aside from the egging. And at least the prank hadn't been pulled a day later. They could get their ducks in a row with plenty of time before the Midwest Now reporter showed up to begin his town profile. I'll make sure Town Hall knows what happened so they can coordinate the cleanup effort. You need to give your leg a rest, Dolores, Greta added. Dolores flicked her wrist dismissively, but turned toward her porch. Tell the mayor we'll be on the lookout for any more funny business. If we catch some meddling kids in action, we'll let that detective friend of yours know, and he can deal with them. You have a good day at the library. The group of neighbors dispersed. Greta's gaze snagged on the gentleman she hadn't recognized. He met her gaze with a pair of nondescript brown eyes, but there was something cold in his stare. She shivered, but she tried to hide it with a smile. He bent down as he approached the dead bird and held up his phone in front of it. Weird. He studied the screen before pocketing his device. Greta was officially curious. Hello, she greeted him as they fell into step. I'm Greta Plank, library director in Larkspur. She motioned ahead to the red brick municipal building that housed the library, police department, and town hall. What were you doing there with the crow? Scanning it with the Nachu Pro app. What's that? The man cut her with another hard look. A nature app I developed that identifies different species of plants and animals. Oh, wow. Greta didn't know such a thing existed. I'll have to check it out. Sounds interesting. When he didn't respond, she switched conversational courses. Are you new to town? Just visiting. The man answered her in a clipped tone and didn't offer his name. Instead, he picked up his pace, limping slightly, and crossed the mum-infested street. He entered Mugs and Hugs Cafe, which sat on the opposite corner. A local hotspot owned by Greta's friend Allison, Mugs and Hugs was as cheery as its name sounded. Greta could really go for a coffee herself, but if she detoured to the cafe, she'd get sucked into the gossip of the day, and she didn't have time for that, no matter how loudly one of Allison's lattes was calling her name. That, and she didn't want the visitor to think she was stalking him or something. She crossed the library parking lot as an unmarked squad car pulled in from the opposite direction. Detective Mark McHenry parked and stepped out of his vehicle clad in his workday attire, a gray suit and tie. He was holding 2 steaming to-go cups from Mugs and Hugs. She joined him, and without a word, he held out one of the cups for her. Greta's mouth fell open. She and the detective had a budding friendship. He didn't appreciate her meddling in his business, but she liked to think he did appreciate her moxie. They were getting used to each other. This was the first time he'd ever brought her coffee, and Greta wasn't entirely sure what to make of it, or of the way the gesture made her stomach feel all warm and fuzzy. She decided it was an anticipatory reaction to the caffeine. That was all. Greta reached for the drink. How did you know I needed this? A hunch. Detective McHenry took a tentative sip, maintaining eye contact over his cup. She closed her eyes, stuck her nose toward the opening of the to-go lid, and inhaled. Hazelnut, her favorite. She took a quick sip. Did you see what happened? Detective McHenry lowered his drink. What do you mean? She hooked her thumb over her shoulder and brought him up to speed on the vandalism in the dead bird. Prevailing theories are that it was some high schoolers causing trouble. The crow might be a fluke. Greta was trying to believe that, even as a chorus of "Nevermore" rang out in her head. I'll follow up. Greta swallowed another sip. I'm going to alert the mayor and the street department so they can get things cleaned up. The detective grimaced. Mayor Collins isn't going to take this well. She's wound up about this Midwest Now feature. She keeps pestering me about it. What does she want from you? He cleared his throat and pitched his voice. "Oh, Detective McHenry, be sure you're out on patrol so the reporter can see that Larkspur is well looked after. Detective McHenry, I'd like to set up a time for you to talk to the reporter about the crime rate in Larkspur. Oh, can you be sure you're in uniform at all times, too? It just looks more professional." Greta laughed. Since his arrival in Larkspur earlier in the fall, the man continued to surprise her. Currently, Greta was having a difficult time ignoring the thought of how much she'd like to see Detective McHenry in his uniform. She'd told herself countless times that she wasn't ready for a relationship after what her ex put her through, but sooner or later, she was going to have to admit that the man in front of her had piqued her interest. For someone who is relatively new to town, you do an excellent Mayor Collins impression. I'll add it to my resume. Detective McHenry deadpanned. Greta grinned into her drink. After a minute, she said, "You know, the mayor just wants to highlight all the good parts of Larkspur. She's a teensy bit uptight about it all." "You can say that again," he grumbled. Greta patted him on the shoulder. "Hello, bicep," and moved to walk past him and toward the glass doors leading to the library. "Good thing she can count on you." "And you. She told me about your speech." Greta paused and faced the detective again, twisting her mouth to the side. "You've heard about that, huh?" He nodded. "When I agreed to give the speech, I didn't realize what a big deal the mayor was going to make the welcome banquet." Greta sighed. "To be honest, it's a lot of pressure. It's much harder to synthesize all that Larkspur has to offer than I first thought. I guess that's a good problem to have, but I don't want to let anyone down." "You'll be great." Before Greta could register the direct compliment, Detective McHenry started in the direction of Larkspur Lane. "Thanks for this." Greta held up her cup and called after him. "Oh, and you'll let me know if there are any developments with the vandals?" He looked over his broad shoulder, his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and the wind ruffling his dark hair. "I'm sure you'll find out either way." Greta smirked and headed in the opposite direction, walking inside the municipal complex and bypassing the library. She cut down the hallway that connected the three wings of the building, through the back entrance, and into Town Hall. The lights were still dim in the vestibule and common space, and Abby Daniels, Larkspur's deputy mayor, wasn't at the desk in her cubicle yet. A bright light shone from underneath the mayor's office door, though, so Greta approached and raised her hand to knock. She froze at the sound of Mayor Collins's agitated voice. "I don't know where you get off, but if you think you can intimidate me, you've got another thing coming. You'll see." Mayor Sandra Collins was an animated sort of person, loud, outgoing, and talkative. She was a leader who never failed to rally the troops to support her cause. In most cases, her cause was the town of Larkspur. Greta didn't know her to have enemies, though some residents in town, like Stuart Diddle, clearly had their criticisms. Greta herself was still a little peeved that the mayor put her plans for a rare books room at the library on the back burner. Something about needing to get the spring election out of the way first. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Sandra. I'd watch your back if I were you." Greta didn't recognize the booming male voice that issued the threat. But vandalism? And now this? Definitely not the way Greta wanted to start her day. "I have information that could ruin you if you're not careful. Just remember that." Mayor Collins's voice was like ice. "I'd like to see you try. I'd watch it if I were you. I don't take kindly to threats." The male voice carried to where Greta had retreated, into the back entrance. "Stay away from me and this town, you good-for-nothing piece of work," Mayor Collins shouted. Greta pressed herself against the wall and prayed she looked like a shadow as Mayor Collins's office door swung open. An oversized man with a receding hairline made a beeline for the front door. Greta didn't get a good look at his face, but he was dressed in a business suit and a long, dark jacket. She was pretty sure she'd never seen him before. 2 mystery men in Larkspur in one morning. What were the chances? Greta waited a couple minutes, debating what to do. Eventually, she took a deep breath, crossed the darkened lobby, and knocked on the mayor's office door. "Come in!" Mayor Collins looked up from her computer screen when Greta entered. "Good morning, Greta. You're here early." The only sign of her heated conversation was the heightened color of her cheeks. If Greta hadn't overheard the spat, she wouldn't have sensed anything was amiss from the mayor's chipper greeting and warm smile. "Lots to do. I'm sure you can relate." Greta took in the mayor's appearance. Not a strand of her brown hair was out of place. It flipped out and rested on the shoulder pads of a crisp suit coat that was vintage in a way that looked chic again. But not even her fashion sense could mask the dark circles under her eyes. Sandra was putting a lot of pressure on herself to make sure the town spotlight went off without a hitch, and it showed. "What can I do for you?" If the mayor wasn't going to bring up the heated conversation, Greta wouldn't either. Instead, she made quick work of explaining what had happened on Larkspur Lane. The more she said, the more Sandra's frown deepened. "Detective McHenry is out getting statements from the neighbors now. The police will take care of the criminal side of things, I'm sure, but I wanted to let someone at Town Hall know so that the street department can get things back in order before tomorrow." Of course something like this would happen. Sandra massaged her temples. "You plan and plan and plan, and then some silly kids decide to pull a prank. Makes me sick." "I'm sure it'll all be okay." Sandra nodded, not looking entirely convinced. "Hey," Greta waited for the mayor to meet her eye. "You're doing a great job. This little hiccup isn't going to derail the months of work you've put into making Larkspur shine." Sandra blew out a long breath. "You're right. Yes, you're right. I'm just glad it wasn't anything more major." Greta wondered if the mayor expected something more major, but she bit her tongue and retreated. No use buying trouble. That's what Detective McHenry would tell her. As Greta approached the library, Josie Sinclair, her coworker and best friend, walked in from the outside door. Josie looked like she belonged on a runway as much as behind the circulation desk of a small-town library. She had high cheekbones, and her sable hair was cut into a blunt bob. Her forehead was covered with effortlessly chic bangs, and she wore her trademark black pencil skirt and a crisp white blouse. "Good morning," Greta said. "Tell that to the mums. It looks a little rough out there." "I know. I was filling in the mayor." Josie flinched. "How'd that go?" Fine. Everything's going to be fine." Greta put her key into the lock and opened the library door, letting Josie walk in first. She glanced up at the clock. "I wanted to meet at some point today to talk about winter programming. If we finalize our offerings, I can tease them during the banquet as part of my rundown of all Larkspur has to offer." "We can do that." "What are we doing?" Iris Thompson, the third prong of their librarian trio, hurried in. She was dressed more casually than Josie, in a cheery yellow sweater, which flattered her pear-shaped figure, and light-washed jeans. Iris wore her goldenrod hair to her shoulder blades, and she tucked a strand behind her ears as she propped the door open. "I'm not late," she added, cutting behind the circulation desk. "I ran into Detective McHenry outside and wanted to let him know about the vandalism." "Such a downer, right?" Josie said. Greta clicked the spacebar a couple of times on the computer in front of her, waiting for the screen to show a sign of life. She made a mental note to be sure to add a line item to the budget for new systems. "He'll figure it out. Dolores and Celeste will keep an eye out, too." Iris's forehead creased. "What would Dolores and Celeste know about the spray-painted stop signs on my drive into work?" "What?" Greta halted mid-keystroke. "What did you think I was talking about?" "The destroyed median and flower beds on Larkspur Lane," Josie filled in. Iris's eyes went wide. "Oh, nope. I didn't know anything about that. But I couldn't miss the graffiti on the stop signs on my way through town. What did it say? Someone spray-painted N-O in huge letters. No? Greta asked. Yes, Iris said. Wait, what? Stop before this devolves into a bad who's on first routine. Josie snorted, but then turned serious. Do you suppose whoever wrecked the median also spray-painted the stop signs? 2 separate groups of vandals striking on the same night seems unlikely. Greta chewed her lip between her teeth. Dolores and Celeste and some of the neighbors pinned the flowerbed disaster on some high school kids. That makes sense, Iris said. I suppose the spray paint could have been done as a senior prank or something, too. Greta didn't respond. Out with it, G. I know that look. Josie folded her arms across her chest. What are you thinking? I don't know. I'm not sure I buy the kids being kids angle. Not with this timing. You think someone did this on purpose ahead of the showcase and festival? Josie said. I wouldn't rule it out. I don't know. There's no need to get ahead of ourselves, is there? Iris sounded hesitant. We've had enough trouble lately. Greta couldn't argue with her there, and maybe that's why her brain was jumping to sinister motives. The murder in town just a few weeks ago had everyone on edge. They were all looking forward to the fall festival to get back to some semblance of normalcy and to come together as a community. At least, that's how Greta felt about things. The trio of librarians were interrupted when 2 moms with several young kids between them strolled into the library. Greta smiled at the group as they fanned out. Most of the children ran to the train table. The 2 moms settled in to watch their kids read and play. A businessman came in, took a seat at one of the tables in the center of the library, and pulled out a file to get to work. Another pair Greta recognized as the owners of the local bar, Bobbers, arrived next. Greta waved to them as they walked to an empty table, clutching their morning coffees from mugs and hugs. Greta loved that the library was a central part of the Larkspur community, a crossroads of sorts. Her whole goal was to make it a gathering place for locals and out-of-towners to meet, share ideas, and utilize resources. That's exactly what it should be. I'll grab the books from the overnight return drop-off bin, Iris said as she ducked into the office. I've got story time this morning. Josie reached under the counter and pulled out the book she had stashed there, spookily The Square Pumpkin. I love that one, Greta said. No better way to charm young minds than with the tale of the odd pumpkin out who ends up saving the day. Indeed. Greta turned her attention back to her computer, even as her mind flew in a dozen directions. The multiple instances of vandalism, the disgruntled app developer, Mayor Collins's early morning squabble, Detective McHenry's coffee offering, the festival, the tourism showcase, her welcome banquet speech, library programming, spookily. The login screen eventually loaded, and Greta entered her username and password and pulled up the list of books she was planning to purchase for the library, setting to work going through the email that was filled with patron requests. Greta wasn't sure how much time had passed. She'd gone down the rabbit hole of book reviews for a particularly polarizing new release when she was startled by a shrill voice. When you're done dinking around the internet, maybe you'd be kind enough to grace us with your presence. Greta looked up and into the face of Cindy Fields, president of the library board. With everything that had happened this morning, Greta had completely forgotten there was a board meeting scheduled. As library director, she was expected to attend. She glanced at the clock on her computer screen, dread settling in the pit of her gut at the thought of dropping the ball. She wasn't sure if she was more annoyed or relieved to find she wasn't even late. In fact, a few of the other library board members walked in behind Cindy. Miss Fields, hello, Greta said coolly. I'll be right with you. Cindy muttered something under her breath and stalked off to their meeting room. Greta saved her book list and retrieved her coffee from the office. She was going to need every drop of it to handle the indefatigable Cindy Fields. The two rarely saw eye to eye on the way the library was run. Greta was convinced the library board president had it out.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?